the bus.
What's good, people, and welcome back to the channel today for another recap and slash review, because this was a little bit different. But as you can see by the graphics here, we're ready to dive into the BMF documentary Blowing Money Fast, which premieres on Starz October 23rd. There are 8 episodes, weekly releases, 30-minute episodes, and as I mentioned, it is a documentary, but yet docu-series because it's a series. So we're here to like everybody that's been a fan of ours has been here for all of our other recaps for all things in Starz and the Power Universe and BMF and whatnot. You know, we like to kind of really get into the extensive breakdown of the episode, but this actually has a different demand, so it's really nothing we can do to break down a documentary because it's all technically facts already there. Yeah, well, by the hands of the beholder, shall I say, facts.
Yeah, of course. Because you thinking self-snitching is happening in this docuseries, you've lost every bit of your mind.
Absolutely. So we'll just give some insight, give our reflections, reactions to things that happen in this episode as we get through each of the episodes and so on. So, Lou, I mean, this has been a story that, like, although I kind of was raised within the era of BMF, I didn't actually understand exactly what was all happening until I got old enough to kind of reflect back. But you kind of was in the nitty gritty of things. You saw the impact of them. And you've seen this sort of just cultural phenomenon they become from over the years. So you got a little bit more of a, shall I say, personal insight and perspective into things. So the first thing I want to kind of throw at you is that, like, you've seen endless, we've seen endless documentaries and tellings of this one.
Oh yeah.
What does this one do different for you that from the rest?
Possibly to hear from, you're actually hearing from Meech in this one. And I'm thinking that is the selling point of it. Especially with the show just coming out. This is going to help people understand that, you know, the show is based on actual facts. Because clearly from the beginning of this episode, when they talk about the relationship of the parents, and you see in real life what actually happened with the parents, you can see the dramatization that happens with the show. So I think this is more of, they're trying to paint it as this is coming from the mouths of the people that's involved. Granted, some of these people have already done interviews, they've already done things of this nature, but I'm guessing if they're attempting to package it a different way.
Yeah.
Again, it's Starz, and they're like, hey, we got one of the biggest shows in the world based off of this story. Why not tell it in a different way? Why not tell you exactly what was happening? Granted, again, without snitching, and letting you know these are the elements of the actual story. And again, from the first episode, you clearly see the separation from the television show versus just docuseries.
Yeah. That's kind of where I want to go at with this episode too. I think when it's been a while since we've seen the first episode, so now hearing some of these players in Detroit during this era, actually hearing the real name and whatnot, keep having to like, wait, what character this was about? And I think obviously we all want to go to Lamar, who Lamar was always the big question of, is he real? Who is he inspired by? And I think it's very clear in this first episode, as we've seen and was told, their first rivalry was against no other than Layton Simon, who I think it's pretty safe to say, like, with him having such an assertance on this documentary, that's certainly who they're talking about in the series.
Like, I always assumed Lamar was a composite of a couple of other characters.
Same.
He clearly would take on the face of someone who they saw as a big adversary to them, especially early on. I think that's the. Granted, on the docuseries is also pointing out, for a lot of people that didn't know, they started out a lot earlier than what people knew, or at least from what the show projects for you to know. They start out a little earlier than that. So when they talk about this guy and they talk about, hey, this dude was crazy, the things he would do, he was feared by everyone. We stepped in, we took over his territory. That's why he got mad. And then we look at Lamar, and you see the story of Lamar, how technically they came and took over his territory while he was gone. Here they have it. No, they did it while he was there. They just didn't care. Like, again, it's given a different perspective of who these gentlemen are versus what you see on the show.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, how far are you willing to go with it?
Yeah.
I mean, again, I think we'll talk about it a little bit later on about especially the separation of Meech and Terry from the perception we see of Meech on the show versus the way they talk about Terry in his first episode. It's kind of like they switch places. Like they said, Terry is the one who stepped up to be the man of the house.
Yes.
Meech is the one who just couldn't get enough of anything. And I would say in the first season, it's been a while since we've seen the first season, but it always came across that Terry wanted to build. And Meech was more like, nah, and we're doing this to keep the family together. And it's like, let's switch that and to tell you exactly what them two was doing.
But I could be wrong because it's been a while since we checked out the first season BMF, but I'm kind of confident that I was saying that, like, I felt like the narrative in the BMF series was that, like, Meech was trying to, like, sort of assume this love letter to his mother in terms of making it seem like he did all this for her. He didn't really mess with his dad like that, but like everything he did was about her. We're like, you clearly, as you said, see this flip now because you heard it from Lucille. Their mother said like, no. And even we'll talk about it in a second, but even by somebody else saying that, like, no, Terry was clearly the man of the house. It's not even a question. Terry stepped up, and well, can't debut that when you got, you know.
But again, that's what makes it good to piece together a docuseries like this with the show before you get the second season of the show, because it's gonna help you like see the difference of what the show portrayed to you versus what real life is.
Yeah,
because I think that's highly important, because as this show goes on, as the television show goes on, you're gonna have to separate it more and more from reality just to dramatize it a little bit more and to keep, you know, statute of limitations ain't for everything. So certain stuff you just are not going to talk about and you shouldn't talk about. So you need to dramatize it in the show. But here they're giving you a piece of, hey, this is the real story of BMF. This is the story that a lot of people got into it late around when Jeezy came in the picture. So maybe you don't know everything that happened before him. You don't know those relationships. And that's what I think it was a smart thing to start the first episode. It's like, hey, we're just going to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Show you how they build up and show you their first big adversary.
Yeah.
And that what happened from there with Detroit, and even to have Detroit in the background like that and talk about the migration that happened in that time period, which again, a lot of people would not know that. You know, we understand that, you know, the motor industry is the reason why Detroit was thriving. A lot of people didn't know that it also led to a lot of white folks just saying, I can't live here anymore. And Detroit becoming a black city.
Yeah.
Like that is, I love that angle from the beginning, just to show you, like, let me try to say this in the right way. It's not that you're going to blame them for what they did. I mean, it's not like you're not going to blame them for what they did and say their actions aren't their own of their own volition, but they're still a product of where they come from.
All day, every day. You know, that's the narrative they're going to spin no matter what.
When you take away options, what do you think people are going to do?
Absolutely.
And they used the great backdrop of Detroit and what was happening to say, like, the options wasn't there.
Yeah.
What you think these boys were supposed to do? Starve? Yeah. Nah. So it was an interesting take. Something we've seen before. Hey, you sling a crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot. We know how this story goes.
Two other things I want to kind of throw out in terms of comparison to the series, and maybe this would be something I kind of aim at for the rest of our reviews and recaps, whatever you want to call them. We did get and like there's interviews from a bunch of different folks. I'll name them in a second, but one person that stood out to me was Derek, one of the founding members of the 50 Boys crew. And why am I talking about Derek here? Because not only did I think he brought a very authentic perspective as to what was happening, but he also spoke to the hierarchy. And he was like, oh, you know, well Meech was this and the T was this and so on, because he was there. And he talked about, you know, how things were ran, how things were operated, which is cool, you know, just in case you didn't know. But also, this sort of feels like the inspiration behind B. Mickey, who I always said was like the brother to them. You know, he was always there. And I did not I've never heard of Derek, never knew who he was. So him having a presence in the documentary, and not just a presence as if he's just like some guy that they didn't say like, well, who wants to step up? No, this was one of the founding members. So like, expect him. I predict expect him to be telling something that we're never going to hear before very soon, because this feels like maybe the time where it's like, well, he's never had a chance to really get to say what he wants to say, because I don't think I've seen him in any documentary. So I'm curious.
Not that I've seen so far of BMF, no.
And I'm curious.
There's a lot of them out there, so there's a chance we missed it, but yeah, not that I've seen.
Dudes like this is the ones you're like, he got a platform now.
He's still no better. He's still no better. Like, you don't talk about everything. I mean,
sure.
Even thinking about this docuseries and them putting it together, the biggest one I was waiting for is Terry.
Yeah, that gotta be episode 8, because
like you hearing from Meech, but T is out. So what do you get him to do this and him to talk about stuff? Again, little stuff. He ain't got to talk about nothing major. Especially later on, for when they blew up and became something huge.
Yeah,
and that's the story that I think, amazingly, with BMF, the story of how they began is a great story for older people my age, but most of the younger people are going to be more interested in when they went to make it a legitimate business, and when they went to flip it, because I think that's when the bigger names of people get involved with BMF, that I think some people are going to be like, I didn't know this person was with them. I didn't know this person was affiliated with them. Like, it's a huge amount of people that got affiliated with them when they attempted to become a legal business. Yeah. And I think that's going to be the one that's going to intrigue the people the most. But folks like us who know the story, know the backstory, it's going to be that build up to that point where you're like, man, I wonder if they're going to talk about this. And they talk about this. And, we know how hot it was in Detroit at some of the time periods, and some of the things that have taken inspiration, or characters that have taken inspiration from BMF. Hell, we wouldn't get a Four Brothers movie with Victor Sweet if it wasn't for BMF.
Facts. Absolutely facts. Kind of run down the list of folks that we saw in this episode, just in case you just somehow wasn't paying attention. You got Lucille, his mother. You got Nicole, the sister, which should be interesting because that character doesn't have much of anything in the series. So is this her opportunity to...
But in real life, I think we talked about it in season 1. I said, hey, the way they're going with the sister here is kind of odd, because I know what the sister went through in real life with them. And she just wasn't no civilian technically. So it's very interesting to see what's going to happen with that character. What they're going to talk about in this docuseries.
Yeah. As you mentioned, we got audio from Meech. You got Scott Bernstein, a journalist, Jamon Jordan, who is a Detroit historian. And as we reflect back, as you said, that the backdrop of Detroit learning about the history and sort of trying to give a little bit of spark and motivation as to why these two brothers decided they had to do what they had to do. They made it very clear, like you said too, the household dynamic was a little all over the place. I mean, after 19 years, the parents divorced, and it was still a lot of struggle. I mean, dad was very into music, but music wasn't paying the bills. And well, we, as you said,
how that story goes.
Exactly. And very much different from the series. So as we look and compare and contrast into that,
I think, again, these type of things are important. I know people are wondering, like, hey, wait a minute, like, they were expecting BMF season 2 to drop here, and then you get this docuseries, but documenting the culture and our past, because BMF is the culture, they're part of the culture, and documenting it for younger people, because I hate to say this, but like my generation that would know about this stuff already, our clock is ticking. we are up in age, so it's good for this stuff to come out for kids in their teens and their 20s to know what this organization is, what it meant to people, the bad they may have done, but the good you may have done. Like, this is important to document everything in our culture for people to know, because we hear names, but we don't get series like this telling us, and we from the DMV, you know how many series we should have based off of stuff of this nature too, for people to know, like, hey, just because you hear,
Yeah.
certain names, Wayne Perry's, and all these certain names. You hear them, but you don't necessarily know the story behind them. You don't know what made the men behind the myth that you hear. And this is why this docuseries is created.
Yeah, and also I want to say this too. Let's go a little bit, pull the curtains back a little bit here, and we also know upcoming in this that we're going to see footage that had not been seen before, because we know folks that was hanging with them tight that says, listen, this is the time, and I think this follows the same thing in the recent not Donda, what was the name of Kanye's Netflix? Genius, yeah, where you had
people documenting everything.
Yep,
and my guy from there is one of them who has footage, a lot of footage of BMF, and we met someone at I think we can say it. We met someone at the Power Kanan book premiere who said the same thing. Like, I have so much footage of BMF and things with BMF, and I'm just waiting for somebody to ask me for it, because if they ask me for it, it's some great footage of it. And those are opportunities you take to again show the world this organization and what these brothers did. I mean, the negatives and the positives.
For sure.
It comes hand in hand. We ain't gonna act like they were just the worst people in the world.
Yeah.
But we're not gonna act like black people do with Scarface. Like, oh my God, he was just misunderstood. Nah. We're not gonna go that route. But again, it's great to tell their story and it be from people who are personally involved with them. The last thing you want is a person coming in and telling your story that don't really know it.
Yeah.
Or doing it for profit only.
For sure. And I also think that, like, another thing that's really important by this is that understanding that this is all under the same umbrella. So, like, if you're getting a documentary with the mom involved, the sister involved, with Meech involved, and other folks in their close circle, then you have to think that, like, the dramatization of the series definitely is going to come from a perspective that everybody knows what story they're going to tell. And so with that, there's a level of respect to it. Yeah, it may not be facts, but the idea is that, like, they wasn't just throwing together something and saying, well, we wanted to come off as if it's real. No, they want it to be a series. This is what they want folks to see. This is the realness that they want folks to see. So, like, you can enjoy both. And as you said, after a while, and as a person in another life that knows a little bit of something about preservation, can tell you that, like, no better time than now, because after a while, some of this stuff is going to get outdated. Conversion is going to be an issue. You just never know. So, like, while we have the opportunity,
when people die, the stories die with them.
Yeah,
and we ain't getting no younger. It is the time where you start telling these stories so people understand it. Because again, if you don't know the past, you will do nothing but relive it. It's highly important to understand. Like, you ain't the first person to do this. You ain't create this walk that you think you did. Like, hey, this is somebody. These are groups of people who did the exact same thing. Learn from their mistakes, because the last thing you want to do is repeat them and be looked at as an idiot. Like, it's a dope first episode. Is a great way to introduce. I do love the setup of it. I can't remember. It's another docuseries that's done in this type of format, with the clips and short montages and things. I cannot remember the name of it. It was done on HBO. I just can't remember. And it's not necessarily in the same vein of this, but it's in a different vein of something else. But it's the same way, because this is high quality. This is not another show that one of the executive producers of this docuseries is doing on another network that just doesn't look as high quality as this one does.
With that being said, two other things I want to touch on really fast is one of our favorite actors and one of our favorite characters in this is Pat, played by Wood Harris. And Pat is a character that, much like we said, seems to be a combination of other influences around him. I feel confident now into saying that. Would you say that that's a combination of Maserati Rick and Edie Boyd? I
think so. I think that's the way it definitely is being played.
Yeah, because, like,
again, Maserati Rick has a name. He's like the first person in the neighborhood. He had status.
Yeah,
and they use his status to get what they That's kind of what happened with Pat.
And then Edie Boy was, I never really understood this, but he was like those were my homies. Like I looked at them like they were like my, we were brothers and whatnot. And that's the same thing we kind of get with Pat, where like Pat is frequently trying to put them on game, get them right. Obviously we know what happened later on in the season, but like, he tried to keep them under his wing as much as he could and so on until they just got bigger and whatnot, which is interesting because they do tell that in the series, but there doesn't seem an ounce of envy coming from Edie Boy. So do you think that envy comes from Maserati Rick, who was the top person?
Hey.
Yeah. Oh.
All I'm gonna say, the only person who clearly story that they're gonna possibly that everyone knows already, so you can talk about as much as you want to, is White Boy Rick.
Yeah,
everybody know that story already. It's nothing high. As they say, he's an anomaly. Like he had no business being involved in the stuff he was involved in, being a white man during that time period.
Yeah,
but everyone knows who White Boy Rick is. He got his own.
Surprised
he got a movie out. He got docuseries out. No, he's a huge player in that time period.
But were you surprised to actually see him on this docuseries? Were you surprised for him to be part of the interviews?
No, because his story is so interwoven with their story that at times you're gonna have to tell it. That's the reason they had Eminem play him in short clip in season 1. It's because like it's during that same time period. It's like if, oh God, nope. I was gonna use an analogy of two DC dudes, and then they pass by each other, and like you can't tell one story without telling his story.
Yeah.
And like that's the kind it is with White Boy Rick and them. Like you gotta necessarily, as much as to me, they always have to be mentioning White Boy Rick's story. It's vice versa.
Yeah. Last thing for you, you mentioned a little bit earlier, but the reenactments. How do you feel about the sort of drama and stakes that they add to this?
Hey man, that's necessary for any docu-series that you do. You still got to add things in it. Netflix is the king of these docu-series right now. They have mastered them to a T. And you have to do stuff like this because it's just a different element to get the audience intrigued. From the Dateline NBC shows when they play the little creepy music and stuff that they do. But it's all to get the audience like, man, let me listen a little closer. What the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
And that they did the same thing here. But I do like that they still let the people's words hold the true weight of everything and just use that as a backdrop. I love the scene with the two cars as they were telling the story of how crazy this dude was as he was chasing them down on the highway, and just to show that imagery of it, to show you like this is how crazy that looks. It's a nice added element to this because you don't want to just sit for even 30 minutes and just have them talking.
This lecture.
You got to add other elements to it. And that's why you also add the reporter to it. That's why you also add the historian to it, because the story can't just be told by them and their family. You got to be able to tell it from a reporter who's possibly investigated them, and he's like, no, hey, I understand that their family think they did X, Y, and Z. This is what actually was happening during this time period, and it's because of their actions that was happening. And then you get the historian like, hey, this is what was happening in the city at this time period. This is the atmosphere that their actions created for this place. Like it's a dope setup. I like the first episode, and that don't happen too often.
Okay.
But this was a dope first episode for a docuseries.
Right on. Well, I think I'm gonna leave it there. I forgot to mention that Roland Rest, their friend, as Nicole said, like a brother, should be interesting to get more story from him as well too. But yeah, that I believe we'll do, unless you got something else you want to add.
Nah, man, this is 30 minutes. We talked for 25.
That's it. Then we out, folks.
They're not getting no hour recaps of this. You lost your mind.
All right.
I start snitching on myself in an hour. Like, you know what? Because I remember when I was no, serious.
All right, folks. Well, then y'all know what to do. Hopefully you have already been subscribed and all that other, YouTube hoopla and whatnot. Just come back next week. We'll be back for episode 2 of the BMF documentary, Blowing Money Fast. Thank y'all for tuning in.